This is part 2 of the massive PE. So we already talked about Wells criteria being high. He did not qualify per rule. He was over 50. His heart rate was over 100. So, he had history of PE in the past. Later on, much later, I found out they had an ivss filter. And remember, they only really work in the first year after like a contraindication for anticoagulation or a major surgery that occurred. And that was years ago, more than 15 years ago, right? So what do I do now? TPA is drawn, BP was low. Probably should have given it then. I had to increase the pressors, but he got more hypoxic. This is the time when the dilemma of waiting to see if I get fluid and the creatinine improved, or waiting for my consultant to give me permission. Allowed another consultant to ICU involved, because I know it was going to the ICU or transfer to another hospital that could provide perhaps better PE care with like catheter directed lytics, slow infusion, thrombectomy by CT surgery. So time passes and time passes, the PE that's not being treated with TPA gets worse and worse, I think. Gets bigger and bigger. And then gets more hypoxic. Should have tried high flow nasal cannula or CPAP, but way sooner. I don't know if he would have tolerated lying flat on his back. I should have tried that sooner. I just bit the bullet and gotten a better scan. Biggest rule in PEs, massive PEs. Do your best to avoid intubation. Do your best. If you think the right ventricle already has stress, you intubate. BP drops. At least the preload drops because you increase the intrathoracic pressure. So less blood enters the right ventricle. And this right ventricle is tenuously working. It's dilated. With our bedside ultrasound, it's dilated. Barely able to handle any additional fluid. Someone would say, hey, maybe a little bit of drop in the BP preload would help. But it needs any type of preload to work. And then, of course, patient BP drops. We got vasopressin on top of the levofed, up the doses. We start epi to keep them alive. A CAT scan was done. It was only done after he was intubated. He was tenuous and he had already crashed. CAT scan inconclusive. Contrast load was mistimed. You can see some fluffiness in the right, left, lower, middle lobes, but cannot see the contrast in the pulmonary arteries to see if there was a clot causing a mainstem thrombus, or is the clot load so large in both left and right main branches to cause the equivalent of a saddle embolism. It would have been a lot easier to be more convinced, to be more aggressive on this patient, but inconclusive CAT scan after all that time, all that delay. We did this emergently because we had verbalized this with the patient. Risk and benefits of CAT scan with your creatinine being above 1.5, and he had said, do everything you need to keep me alive. He's outlived all his family. He only has friends. Outlived his mama. Outlived his family, siblings. He has no children. So please try your best to avoid intubating this patient. Please. My God. It's so tenuous. At least 3 or 4 times. More than that, he went to cardiac arrest. But he lived. Imagine that. Touch and go. Luckily, the rest were 2 to 5 minutes, and it was witnessed with good CPR. Then he had to measure BP and rise in end-tidal CO2 abruptly. 2 minutes for transfer. And unfortunately, we don't do ECMO in our hospital. ECMO probably would have helped. It would have been a bloody mess doing it after pushing the TPA. I'm going to tell you straight up. After the CAT scan, I saw abnormalities that I was convinced were PEs. Gave the TPA 50 because I want to minimize the chances of bleeding in the brain. Luckily, we had just done the CAT scan of the non-con of the head. The clip worked. There was no active bleeding of the brain. Then I had said, stop the heparin. I gave the 50 of TPA. And I had another 50 of TPA when he arrested once the first time. After that, the second time, he was already arrested. He's as critical as he could be. He came back after that one cardiac arrest, less than 2 minutes. Kicked his heart hard with a dose of 1,000 mics, which is also 1 milligram of Epi. And he came back. I was like, I'm not going to play. This guy's has to be a PE. And if he doesn't have a PE, it's something else, and I've missed it. Second dose of TPA, worked on for the next hour and a half to 2 hours, and he lives. He stabilizes long enough to be turned on to get ECMO in another hospital. And he stabilized long enough to go up to the emergency, up to the ICU. A few hours later, when sedation's kind of on and off with fentanyl, he's found commands with the ET tube in. Next day, he's off all his pressors. He's still meditating, nodding and shaking his head for questions, following commands, moving his arms and legs spontaneously. On the third day, he gets extubated. And he gets to thank us. I get to thank him for the opportunity of saving his life. One of the few times it's awesome to be an ER doctor. One of the awesome times. I thank you. I thank you. We saved a life despite our inefficiencies and our mistakes. Who cares about command? Get the CAT scan faster. Non-invasive could have also dropped his BP further, but it would have allowed him to tolerate lying flat sooner on a CAT scanner and give TP the minute the patient becomes hypotensive and hemodynamically unstable, even before the CAT scan was done. Lessons to be learned. Because then I could hopefully have done with the first three, avoided the fourth. The almost fatal blow of intubating the patient. Almost fatal blow. But by waiting too long, the burden of the clot had gone too big and he would not have tolerated lying flat on his CT scan. And he probably could have gone to complete respiratory failure and died on the CAT scan table. Even before intubation, so. In retrospect, everyone's smarter retrospectively. Looking forward into the future, be more aggressive. I still have to learn more in 13 years. These 13 years that passed, and I have maybe 13 more years left in this crazy career of mine to learn more and be more wise. Not unwise, but more wise. Please come back to another episode of School Airway. Bye-bye.